Okay. The painting techniques we're going to go over are listed right here. The first one we're going to do is called wet on wet. So we're going to load our brush with a paint color, whatever color you want. I'm going to grab some yellow. And we're going to use this whole paper for all these techniques. So try not to use too much of the area on your paper. But we're just going to start painting, and I'm just kind of doing X's like this, back and forth. Just adding some paint to my paper. And then I'm going to load my paintbrush with a different color. And I'm going to work this wet paint, this wet blue, on top of the wet yellow paint. And then you'll notice that the more marks you make, the more the colors mix together. So this is a really nice technique if you're using several colors and you want to see all of those colors. Or if you're trying to mix colors and blend, you'll want to do it when your paint is wet, because your colors are not going to mix or blend if your paint is dry. So you guys can go ahead and paint along with me. So I have a lot of blue and a lot of green. My yellow is getting covered up a lot, so I'm going to actually wash my brush out, and I'm just going to add some more plain yellow. And the more you mix, the more it's going to mix the colors together. So I don't want this all to turn green. I want to see yellow, blue, and green. So I'm going to stop mixing so that they don't all mix to one color. Okay, so that's wet on wet. The next technique we're going to practice is gesture. These marks are going to be made using your whole arm. So we're going to stand up for this one. So everybody stand up. Load your brush with a color. You can get a lot of paint. And we're going to make very large movements on our paper. Use your whole arm. Do curved lines, squiggly lines, zigzag lines. Okay, gesture lines are showing direction, they show movement, but they're very large, so use your whole arm instead of your wrist. If you need to hold your paper down with your other hand, hold it down so it doesn't move. Grab another color if you want. Start mixing your colors together. So I'm doing yellow paint on top of pink, which is making orange. Okay, have a seat when you're done with that one. Next we're going to move to impasto. Impasto is where we're building up really thick layers of paint, so we're kind of creating a texture, a real texture onto our paper. So for this one, you guys are going to have to scoop up a lot of paint. Okay, and I'm going to find a new spot on my paper here. And when you apply the paint to your paper, don't worry about smoothing out your paint. When you create these large clumps and chunks of paint, you want to keep those. I'm going to add white to that. So I have a lot of paint on my brush, and I'm just adding it to my paper. You don't want to leave huge piles of paint, but you do want to keep some texture. So whenever you apply the paint to the paper, that's when it creates the most texture. You want to keep most of that. And then we're going to let this dry, and we can come back and we can keep building up that texture. But when it's wet, it's hard to add the texture because the more you keep mixing, the flatter it's going to get. We don't want it to be flat. Sometimes it helps if you twist the paint like this, twist it off your brush to get the paint off onto the paper. Okay, now we're going to do number 5. We're going to skip layers and we're actually going to do number 5, energetic brush strokes. This is going to be pretty similar to our gesture strokes, except for these are going to be a lot faster and smaller. We're not going to stand up and use our whole arm. We're just going to stay sitting and we're going to use wrist movements to create smaller strokes. So I'm going to use my pink paint again. You guys can use whatever color you want. And for this one, I'm going to use my wrist and do really fast, like up and down, whatever kind of movements. I'm even lifting my brush up a little bit every so often. And it's kind of scribbly marks. And I'm going to use different colors. You can do like stippling and add some texture. You're moving your hand back and forth really fast, up and down, kind of scribbling. Just keep dipping your paint back and forth between 2 colors. It's okay if you're layering your techniques on top of each other. It's totally fine. I want you guys just to have fun making this. Don't worry about what it looks like in the end. Alright, number 6 is double loaded brush. This is where we're going to load 2 colors onto our paintbrush. So I'm going to clean it off, start fresh. And I'm going to dip my paintbrush in, let's see, I'm going to dip it in pink and yellow. So I have yellow and pink both on my brush at the same time. And then I'm just going to paint with both of those. Again, I'm going to dip it in pink, get some yellow. So the more you twist your brush and use it on both sides, it's going to apply both of those colors at the same time. It's also going to mix those 2 colors a lot faster because number 1, they're both wet and they're right next to each other when you're applying them, and you're applying them both the same way. So they're going to mix a lot faster than something like this where we're layering wet on wet. So the paint that we're using is acrylic paint. Acrylic paint dries really fast. So find an area on your paper where you have some dry paint. So like right here on my paper is pretty dry. It's still wet if I tried to smear it, but right here is mostly dry. So I'm gonna grab another color like white, something that's different. And I'm going to add another layer. So we're working on number 4 right now. We're working on layers. And layers is when you're painting on top of something that you already have. So I'm going to add some white on top of this. And the stuff underneath is still a little wet, so it might blend a little bit. Just adding some expressive brush strokes on top. Just kind of some scribbling some white on top. Then we're going to do sgraffito, where you take the bottom, use the bottom of your paintbrush, and you're going to scribble some lines and some marks in here on top of this wet paint. And it creates a really cool texture. So I'm doing some stippling, you can draw, you can do whatever kind of marks and lines that you want. So since I'm scraping off wet paint, you can see the colored dry paint underneath. So the paint underneath is dry, and I'm scratching through the wet paint. And you can do that. Wherever it's still wet, you can scratch. That's sgraffito. So far we've done wet on wet, we've done big gesture marks, we've built up texture with impasto, we did layering, so wet paint on top of dry paint, we did small energetic brush strokes, we did the double loaded brush with 2 colors, we did sgraffito, Now the last one is our drip and splatter. So in order to do this one, you need to add some water. So load your brush with water. Grab some water. And just mix that with some paint to make it kind of watered down. So it's way more fluid than pasty. When you guys buy acrylic craft paint at Walmart, usually it's more fluid like this. And then the artist acrylic paint is more pasty, thicker, like toothpaste almost. So in order to make it more fluid, you just have to add water to it. Acrylic paint is water-based. Then if you grab enough paint, you can honestly just kind of drip it and splatter it, twirl it, or you can use one of your fingers to go like this and kind of get it off the tip of your brush. The more water you add, the easier it will be to do the splatter and the drip. So you can kind of throw it at your paper, drip it. If you can stand up and you can throw it standing up. Okay, that can create some sort of emotion and mood as well. So what I want you guys to do after you have practiced these techniques, think about the emotion that you're going to show in your painting. Choose the colors that will help show your emotion, and practice using these techniques that you think will go with your emotion. So you guys are going to practice these techniques with the colors that you think you want to use, and you're going to do it in your sketchbook. Okay? Any questions? All right, good job.